So you want to know how to treat your injuries with peace and love. Is it peace and love?
Peace and love.
Peace and love. Peace and love. This is a real thing, people, and we're going to dive deep into it today. We're going to also answer some really good questions to wrap up the week. We're back. We're back. Now, first, you're going to notice that Rad isn't here at all. He's not actually present at the gym. He's moving house. So I have Phil. Phil's done it. I have Phil here, the rookie, for Physio Fridays. This could be a new thing.
Yeah, Physio Fridays. And I'm sitting on the wrong side, which for the podcast listeners is not a big deal, but I'm feeling very, a bit all over the place on this side. Yani insists that his right arm's his bigger arm, so he wants to be able to sort of do some sort of flex. So every time he does, just give us like a little thumbs up for every time you see the guns coming out.
That's right. Yeah, so. I legit have a bigger arm and I like it on the outside. No, I just thought I'd like to be consistent because I was sitting here yesterday. Now, we've got a couple of interesting questions coming through from people who are straining muscles, hurting themselves. And today we're going to build some context on what is the best approach for that sort of thing. We're going to go into the most current research strategies on managing injuries of those sorts.
Yeah, so especially we're talking like acute injuries, so it's like not just like quite different to tendinopathies we talked in the past, quite different to sort of, that slow onset repetitive strain injury. This is more like, you are sprinting and you pull a muscle, or you roll your ankle, or in this case, maybe you've done your pancake stretch and you're going way too hard and you feel something like, oh, that's an acute injury. Quite different. So
yeah, that's exactly right. So we're also going to talk a little bit about a nerve issue that one of our UMS online coaching tribe members' partner or wife is suffering from, and how to best approach that, because there's lots of really great, best intended contributions by other tribe members, and we just want to address all of that as a whole, straight up. So it is going to be a bit of Physio Friday this week.
Because the plan was to move back towards more of that strength and flexibility, and we're definitely, any of those questions that are coming through, so if you put one in now, we'll talk to that. But there does seem like a lot of our tribe really is just like so much about injuries. So I thought it'd be good just to jump on, kind of clear up a few little things there, and if that's kind of seems to be the case going forward and people want it, we can keep doing Physio Fridays. But
there's new research that, and I'll let Phil sort of build context around this. Initially, when I heard it, I genuinely thought it was the same strategist from the Thoughts and Prayers theory when we were. When
you're on your own. You're not seeing anyone.
That's right. We were having recent bushfire disasters over here in Australia, and we got a lot of thoughts and prayers sent from a leadership team that were on holidays, and people made a big joke about that. So that's a bit of an ongoing inside country national joke now, thoughts and prayers. But peace and love is legit. It's a real strategy, and I'll let Phil build some context around that.
Yeah, so I guess as I'm sure most people, when they've injured themselves over the years, they would have had people like rush to their side, like wrap up. If the classic is doing your ankle, so you roll your ankle and it swells up like a balloon. So people, wrap it up. They tell you to put it up above your head. So lie down and maybe elevate it on a chair, and then put an ice pack on it and do that for the first couple of days, and then when you feel better, get back into your sport.
So you're talking about the old RICE acronym, right?
Yeah, well, this was it was originally ICE, so just ice, compress, elevate, and then they're like, oh, we should probably put some rest in there as well. So it was rest, ice, compress, elevate, and then went to PRICE, so protect. Rest, ice, compress, elevate. Yeah, and then now they've kind of started to realize, like, oh wait, when we think about tissues, like as I've talked so much about before, is like it's all about preparing your body to get back to doing what you're doing. So they've added they've now changed to peace and love. So peace and love.
So explain peace and love. First of all, is it two acronyms?
So when you're looking at peace, that's the initial acute, like first day or two of an injury, and depending on how severe the injury is and how intense like the inflammatory process is and how like crippling it is, like that's kind of going to be between 1 to maybe 72 hours. So 1 to like 3 days. And so peace stands for protect, elevate, avoid anti-inflammatories, compress, and education. So
avoid anti-inflammatories.
So that's different. Yeah. And anti-inflammatories is the medication. So that's like, taking your ibuprofen or other anti-inflammatory medications. Yep. But it's also ice. So they've got rid of ice, which is huge
right.
because that was
is
like
huge,
that's the thing that
that's what everyone thinks.
everyone-
I'm just adjusting my chair because your arm's cut off and mine isn't, which is
All right,
just terrible framing from Richie.
Yeah, what are you up to, mate?
You failed there, mate. How are we now? Are we framed better?
I feel like
Yeah.
working with us is like herding cats, so I don't at all blame him, and I think he does a wonderful job every day. But we'll get my big left gun in.
That's all right.
Yeah, so they've got rid of anti-inflammatories, which is huge. So it's the big change there is that basically realize like, oh, maybe the body's like trying to do something when it's getting all inflamed and stuff. Maybe it's not this like unhelpful thing. Maybe it's the body's exact way of dealing with injury, which it is.
Yeah.
And so
that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So when you have
sense.
like what inflammation is and why you get sort of these big swollen joints or areas is that you get a flood of nutrients, and you get like a whole lot of white blood cells and red blood cells that go in there, and they're really trying to provide that area with like basically patch everything up, give it plenty of nutrients so it can start healing and go on its way. But if you go in there and you're trying to block that and you're trying to stem the flow of this like of all these resources that are going there, then it makes sense that kind of does slow down
the healing process.
Yeah, and also on top of that, one of the issues with anti-inflammatory medications is pretty a lot of them, ibuprofen being the big one, which I'm not a doctor and can't prescribe medication, but one big problem that people have, especially during sports, is that often they've got a bit of an empty stomach and they're taking anti-inflammatories, and that can be really problematic for stomach ulcers and the like. So, but that's secondary to the fact that they think inflammation, really useful. Nature doing its job.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's a really completely different take on the concept, because your first go to is okay. I'm in pain. I want to get out of pain, and I've certainly reached for anti-inflammatories when I've triggered something in my body as a first resort, because I just want to be able to continue through my day and power on, pain free. So that's a big one.
So that's not saying again, not a doctor, not prescribing anything here, but just to be clear, like anti-inflammatories is quite different to pain medications. So like Panadol or Tylenol, if you're in America, that's very different to ibuprofen. So this Peace and Love is making no comment on pain medication, but for anti-inflammatory specifically, that's where the recommendation is. So just to again sort of looking big picture. So Peace is looking at that first like day to 30 to 3 days, so 72 hours, and then Love is looking at kind of 3 days up to like to progress you back to exercise. So that's the difference there. So again, just to go over Peace, we've got protection, elevation, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, and education, and we'll go step by step through each of those. But then Love is load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise.
I love optimism.
Yeah.
That's
there you go.
Totally.
We've been harping on about pain science for most of this year, and you can see how
it's now snuck its way into.
And this is coming from British Journal of Sports Medicine, so this is coming from like the top.
Yeah.
They know what they're talking about here, and just so great to see that they've got this sort of acknowledgement of how your mindset will play a role in your long-term outcomes. So I think that's
fantastic. So just go over Love again. Sorry, because I just fixated on optimism.
So we've got load. So they're actually saying like after you've done the protection at the beginning on like where if it's really sore and you can't do anything, like just give it a couple of days, like that 3 days of letting the inflammatory process go. And then once you get back, like up after about 3 days, depending on how intense it is, then adding some load. So doing some gentle strengthening that's not going to exacerbate things, but just gentle loading of the structures is going to be a way to do it. And so when I injured my hamstring, I tore my hammy quite badly a few years ago, to the point where it was like bleeding down the back of my not like out of my body, but inside you get like the bruising down into your calf. And I was playing tournaments, and I had nationals coming up, and this is with Ultimate Frisbee, and I went to see a physio, and it was like the first time I've ever had something that wasn't just like, all right, stop until you can get straight back into it. And so she had me like the next day going down to the park and doing like lateral sprinting, so like grapevine sort of movements and side to side shuffle, going as fast as I can. She's like, it's so important to keep every other part of your body conditioned. It's really important to keep that sort of speed and that power generation that you've got through your season. If you just totally stop now, then you're going to lose that. But when you're doing just that abduction adduction movement, so moving in that sort of horizontal plane, my hamstrings are no longer getting stretched, so therefore a tear is not going to be as affected. So it was such a great like I just bounced back so quickly from that injury. And so that's what this is kind of talking about. Not necessarily saying you have to go out there and, sprint in a weird way, but just that idea of like giving your body some load so it realize like, hey, we need to get back to moving again. And
now this is going to become the basis of the majority of our conversation today. So we'll come back to this because it's so important that people understand what type of load is suitable and how to manage that. But let's just quickly move through the rest of the acronyms.
So you got optimism. So basically, what we've
mindset,
talked about, mindset is key, and that, there's like research to show that people who are really doom and gloom about things, and it might not be, it might be because of the information that they're getting from other, people, or they've, had someone else who had this injury and they've had really bad outcomes. All of those things can really play into your sort of, optimism and how you think your injury is going to go.
Yep.
And it showed that people who, feel better about their injury at the beginning will.
Yeah, I think there's a real
outcomes.
tendency. Sorry to cut you off,
No,
because
please.
this is something that's really important. I feel like there's a real tendency for us to want to validate the pain that we're experiencing when we suffer an injury, and I've seen this a lot. We tend to look for a diagnosis that validates the pain, and if we don't get one, and I've felt this myself, sometimes I've been so sure that I've done something really severe and I've gone, no, I want to go and get a scan done or something like that, and when it comes back suggesting that there's really nothing wrong, like nothing serious wrong, and I can go back and start loading it, you're almost upset. You're kind of like, well, what am I experiencing all this pain and discomfort for?
Totally.
And I feel like this topic of mindset, of optimism, is so much more important than people are going to give it recognition for. Because you hurt yourself, and then you kind of like, when you're a kid, it was cool to get a cast and go back to school and have all your friends sign your cast, and that sort of notion, I feel like it just sticks with us throughout life. When we go and hurt ourselves, and we might have to take a bit of time off work or something like that. When you come back to work and people say, "So what happened to you?" You want to say, "Oh, I busted my arm, I broke my bone, or
really
something
serious.
really serious happened to me." And it was really validated that I took time off, and you want to name your problem. You want someone to say, you almost want to go in with a certificate going, this validates my condition, and it's the exact opposite thing that we need to be doing.
Yeah. And so one really important thing with that optimism is it's realistic optimism. Yeah. So it's not like if you tear your ACL, you're like, not going to be, everything's great. I'm going to be fine to be back in the field in, 3 weeks or 3 months. Like that's an injury that's going to take a year, but it's about framing that injury and like, it's an opportunity to work on some other parts of your life or other parts of your training, or like it's, you take it on as a challenge to realize like, okay, there was clearly like a weakness here that I need to, address, and I'll be a better person or a better player or whatever for it. So again, it is realistic optimism. It's not just,
absolutely.
So we'll keep.
We look awfully pale in the video. Is there any chance you can give us that Hawaiian glow?
Yeah, turn up that those orange hues, get us Trump style. So we'll keep moving on. So V.
I can't continue until I see a Hawaiian glow. No,
I'm
kidding.
The right arm, the tan. What am I working with here? All right. So vascularization is that's the next step. So for love, we've just done LO, and now we're going to V. So that's vascularization. So that's the idea that just like that. Now we're encouraging the inflammation process to happen with our body. We realize like, hey, maybe like sending blood flow and nutrients is a really good idea. So vascularization is all about kind of continuing that on after you now are starting to move. So it's encouraging things like light aerobic exercise that you can manage. So, for some injuries, that will mean, maybe you won't be able to go for a run, but you'll be able to sit in a bike, or maybe you won't be able to use your legs, but you can use a ski erg. It's that idea about just getting the blood flow happening so you're actually, staying in a sort of healthy physiological state and really promoting that sort of blood flow around the body.
And that's, I think that kind of comes in and ties in with the load part as well, because people often... the most common thing is that you rest too much, I think, after an injury. You have this mindset of, okay, I'm going to take time off now, and there was the old notion that, you need to take a couple of weeks off, or like the amount of times I've been to a physio that, which really gave me a bad opinion of a lot of therapists was, take 2 weeks off the gym or 4 weeks off the gym. irrespective of what sort of was wrong,
Yeah.
And I just dislike that, I dislike that whole theory, because I think that, as you said just before, there's always sort of something that you can do. You just need to
and as we talked about before, so much it's like negative spirals versus positive spirals. When you're on a real health kick and you stop moving, then suddenly your diet starts slipping, and you're like, oh, whatever, I'll just stay up and watch movies, and like your sleep starts to go, and then that you don't have these stress management systems. So I think there's real positive and negative cycles that play such a huge role in how people deal with things, and when some people are particularly susceptible for that with injuries, and really can undo a lot of sort of hard work. So by having this kind of more active approach, where you're like taking respecting the injury, taking a couple of days just to let things settle down, but then you're getting straight back into things and finding things you can do, then that's so powerful to keep that that positive spiral going and really still move forward with all the other parts of your life. So I think it's a really good message. Now we'll get into the last one, which is E for exercise. So that's the last bit of love. And so, there's really strong exercise evidence that just exercise is key, and it's all about, I guess, building that pathway back to doing the thing that the person wants to be doing. So load is very much about so that micro factors, so looking at that particular structure and, how are you going to be able to weight bear through that thing? How are you going to, get the right sort of amount of targeted muscle strengthening? And then with the exercise component, it's more like looking at...
just to give you an example and to clarify, for load, you were told after your hamstring injury to load laterally, almost immediately.
Yeah, so that's really
not in a forward plane that would stretch the
hamstring.
stretch the hamstring and potentially open that or re-aggravate that tear. That's a good example. It's getting the load right is key.
Exactly. And we're not saying train through pain here, at this stage where we've talked about pain a lot in the past, and for acute injuries, pain is a really useful feedback. So it's a good sort of time to be using pain as okay, if I do a thing and it hurts, then maybe find a different way of doing things or scale it back a little bit. It's when the pain starts to become less useful after, the longer it sort of stays on. So, but in this really acute phase we're talking about, because remember with Peace and Love, it's all about initial acute injuries, which is different to overuse injuries. For those people who've just tuned in recently, I can see there's a few people watching. We're really talking here about you've just done an acute mechanical injury. It's not a tendinopathy. It's not a chronic lower back pain. It's this is you've twisted your ankle, or you've torn a hamstring, or you've hurt your shoulder.
Perfect.
Peace and love.
So let's peace and love. And this is I think it makes so much more sense, and it's really good because it's very much in alignment with what we've been preaching for a while, or the message we've been giving. So let's go specific into a couple of questions that have come through, or not even questions. Becca Perry, who's a part of our UMS online coaching tribe, has posted in regards to her straining an adductor while she's doing a pancake stretch, and we do, quite aggressive loaded stretching in the program. And I'll just read it out to build some context. She's sort of saying she's been reminded recently that patience is king. She strained a muscle pushing too hard with the pancake. She says she got a little excited because she could feel some real release occurring, and she took it too far, which is very common. We've all done it, particularly in the loaded pancake or the loaded middle splits. It's quite easy to do. Now I will have to take it easy on the pancake stretch for a while. I'm able to tolerate gentle pancake stretching, so fortunately it's not too bad of a strain. All really good feedback, and she's using that discomfort or pain as a feedback mechanism. Very quickly before we dive into specifics of what we're talking about with the Peace and Love strategy, it's very important to remember for everybody who's not part of the UMS online coaching, stretching to discomfort is what we recommend. Stretching to pain is absolutely not recommended because it stifles progress. Remember that flexibility training is all about breaking down or delaying the brain's natural response to inhibit movement that it doesn't feel confident with. So repetition is key. But if you stretch too far and cause yourself pain, like in this instance that Beck's done, what it does is it reinforces to the brain that that was a dangerous movement, and it will restrict it more. So she'll come back less flexible than she was last time.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important to understand. Now, unfortunately, the process of learning what discomfort and pain is for you is a bit of requires a little bit of self-discovery and exploration, which Becca Perry can vouch for now.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. Someone who's really tolerant to stretching will most likely know their limits much more.
And again, it'll come down to that training age concept that we've talked about quite a lot in the past. So if you've sort of done activities where you've been used to, stretching your muscles under that kind of load, so maybe you've got a dance background or something like that, or even if you've just got really strong adductors from something like pole dancing or something where you've got really strong contractions like in those muscles, then they're probably used to being a bit more strained, and therefore they can probably handle it more, and you can probably more aggressively progress through your stretching.
Yep.
But if you've got a very young training age, so you've never done anything like that before, and you're just like, hey, I want to do the splits, but you've never been close in your life and you're just getting really into it, then you're going to have to take things slow. Your body's not used to it. And certainly, like, the older you get, like, the slower you'll have to be as well. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
But yeah, it's experimentation, and you just got to...
You got to kind of persevere, and you will find that you take strides forward, but sometimes you take strides backward, and that's part of the process, you know.
And as Rad and I were talking about earlier in the week, I think it was, that basically when you're looking at this sort of how to program your stretching, like where, the daily mobility, the daily low-level movement is so key, and exposing your body to sort of, the, like, kind of gentle outer limits of your range, like, really frequently is a great idea. When it comes to this kind of stretching, you don't want to be doing sessions like this day after day after day, because you will
need time
just
to recover. So let's apply the peace and love strategy for Becca Perry. Not knowing exactly, like, we haven't diagnosed Beck, and Phil hasn't consulted with her, which would be highly recommended. In the event, in any event that you've injured yourself, you can connect with fantastic physiotherapists like Phil, even online. Phil does
I'm so close
online.
to being totally ready to go. I'm doing a couple of trial ones with some of the UMS members who have reached out over the next few days, and I've just got some little sort of things to iron over, but I'm pretty much good to go with that. So I'm excited about giving it a shot and seeing how we go, because remember, with all the videos that we do here, like I just love so much giving out this general advice that people can hopefully inform the way they train, but when it comes to specific medical advice, things I say here can't be taken sort of out of that context when I haven't done a full-on assessment and like personalized discussion. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with people more one-on-one with the online consultations.
So if I'm going to throw you on the spot here, if Becca Perry reached out to you, would you do a consult with her?
Absolutely. I'm still figuring out kind of the pricing around it, but I've I'm figuring it out.
So the first step when you injure yourself, and I really can't stress this enough, try not to rely on Dr. Google. Try to get yourself aligned with a good physiotherapist. And if you don't have one locally to you, then reach out to someone like Phil who does online physiotherapy. That's number one step, because you do want to really know what's going on in your body, and a good physiotherapist won't just diagnose. They'll help you with the strategy after that as well. 9 times out of 10 when I see Phil consult with people here in the gym, he's working with them on the gym floor with exercise, not what you would think.
Which is why online consultations is such a potential thing for physio these days, because as Peace and Love is kind of showing, it all comes down to getting that load management right, and it really comes down to understanding how to train and understanding how to strengthen the right ways. And so much less of it is about the hands-on magic hands and elbows and fancy machines. Like, it really does come down to good, sound, like, personalised advice and education.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's apply peace and love to Becca. She's done let's just say hypothetically, we're sure that she's done an adductor strain. And it's...
So there's different levels of strain, like, tears or strain. Strain's kind of a funny word. Like, it sort of doesn't mean, like, it's not a very precise word, I guess.
Yeah.
And so when it comes down to diagnosing, like, a muscular injury, we're kind of more looking at different levels of tears. So there's different grades.
So let's just be absolutely clear, guys. When someone refers to a strain, it is a tear. That's right?
Yeah.
Yep. And we try to avoid using the word strain because it's just more clear to use a grade 1, 2, 3 tear, right?
Yeah. So I think when you like sometimes with strains, you can kind of be looking at like ligaments that get stretched, whereas when we're talking about muscles here, it really does come down to more of like a tear. So we'll just, for muscles, we keep it to just grade 1, 2, 3. And so grade 1 is kind of like a, very minor, some fibers, some amount of discomfort, but you can weight bear pretty comfortably. You can, move around it pretty easily, and you can, it'll come good pretty quickly. Now grade, it's kind of a funny thing with the podcast listeners might be able to see me, but like, you kind of have these like two right at like ends of the spectrum. So grade 1 is, like a pretty sort of narrow band of like, some amount of injury, and then grade 2 is like this vast gulf in the middle of like a grade 2 can be pretty fine, or it can be, almost
serious,
almost crippling. So it's not the most perfect system, but by the sounds of it, if Becca's kind of still sounds like she's moving around pretty well.
She's saying that she can still do it a gentle or a regressed version of the pancake, so I would dare say it's definitely a grade 1.
Yeah, sure. And so again with grade 3, that's a full-on rupture. So grade 2, big sort of
just quickly to clarify, grade 3 is like where the muscle is detached now. It's separated.
Yes. They're no longer touching.
They're no longer touching.
Whereas grade 2 can be like hanging on by just a few sort of muscle fibers, or it can be a fairly solidly attached muscle. So again, it's not the best system, but we'll have a look at just assuming that it's a grade 1 tear. The way we'd be kind of thinking about this is a lot of the like real acute stuff here probably doesn't apply so much, like unless you're getting significant kind of bruising down the leg, which might show up quite a bit further down than you expect. Like as I said before, I had quite a high hamstring tear, and I was seeing bruising in my calf because it bleeds and it just follows gravity.
Down,
So if you're getting like some bruising through there, then that's probably a sign that maybe spend some time in the peace component. So the protect, elevate, avoid anti-inflammatories, compress, and education. So spend some more time there, and then when we go forward, it will be all about that, all about the love. So, but for you, I think you're probably at the stage where
She just needs some love.
She just needs some love.
Yeah, she needs some love.
There's
so many places we can go with this acronym. So just bear with us if you don't find our jokes funny today.
But so with like, in terms of protection for if it was like a really significant adductor tear, like for the protection side of things, you might end up being on crutches. So that's what protect means, like it really taking the weight off it, really avoiding the amount of movement through your leg, really avoiding sort of,
a boot could be protect, like when they put you, not for her, but for an ankle or
for an ankle, absolutely.
Like
slings for your shoulder. So that's what protect is all about. Elevate is trying to get the place of injury above your heart. With adductors, you're going to have a hard time like that unless you don't mind doing
swing upside down,
lying on your back and legs against the wall or something like that. So again, tricky thing to do. Lying down with a pillow underneath your hips, I guess, could kind of do it. But again, for you,
would just lying down be sufficient?
Like slightly elevating it would be better. But like, again, for this, not so relevant in grade 1. Avoid anti-inflammatories. So again, that's both medications and ice. And then for compression, you might, add a...
For the adductor, how would you compress?
Yeah, like not a...
Wear some bike pants like I do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So you could have something like that. Yeah. The issue with compression is often you kind of worry about pooling of fluids below that. So if you go really tight here and you do have lots and lots of like fluid and inflammation and everything, like it's kind of potential for things to pool lower down. Probably less relevant in this, but something like instead of having the bike shorts, maybe having full on like
Stockings.
full like skins, leggings. So that's a way of doing compression.
So wear your leggings, compression tights, Becca. That will help you.
Yeah, and you can you can use some sort of like bandages that are quite wide, but again, you got to be fairly careful then that you don't end up getting really tight spots, and you don't want to go for like long periods of time. So I'm less big on like compression as being a really big deal in a case like this. It's not really something I'd worry about. And then education really comes down to, understanding your sort of prognosis, so what you're likely to expect in terms of healing, like how long is it going to take, all that kind of stuff, which you got to deal with. Ideally with a professional. So for load, this is where we get into the nitty gritty for this particular one. So
Yeah, and this is the part that I think people get really wrong.
we both just had a bit of a rant about this before we got on air.
Yeah, that's right. Look, we get a lot of people reaching out to us who say, I've strained this, I've strained that, and immediately, we get...
Or like, this hurts. It's probably just, I'm not stretching enough. I think
that's right. And the first thing that people seem to resort to when they get a grade 1 tear is stretching. And you've got to think, and the most logical way of looking at this, into my understanding, and Phil can complete this afterwards or correct me if I'm wrong, if you imagine an abrasion or a cut to your superficial tissues, so the skin, if you were to stretch the skin around that area, you're going to re-aggravate or open up that cut even more. The exact same thing, to my knowledge, happens to the tissues underneath the skin.
Yeah.
It's
like having a scab.
Yeah.
If you had a cut in your leg and you're getting stitches, that's going to help it stay together, and that's going to help it, like everything sort of knit up and heal.
Yep.
Whereas like people kind of go like, oh, it's tight and sore and spasming. And the reason it's spasming is because it's trying to keep things close.
Yeah.
Spasming is contraction to try and keep everything close, to lock down movement. It's trying to do all the peace and love stuff by itself. Like your body's amazing at healing. And so it's figured that out. And then people are like, no, it must be stretched. So it's like just a big like, screw you, buddy.
We don't mean to laugh at you people, but it's just the go-to resort of injury
and
management.
Like I've done it before I learned about all this stuff. It kind of feels like it's sort of the right thing to do, and the culture just sort of thinks that like there's this sort of magical property that like stretches a cure-all.
Yeah.
Whereas when you think about this sort of stuff, like we've got to give it the protection time, so time for it to sort of settle down, and then we've got to get that load management right. And when you think about contractions, what would be to get that load management right for something like this, we're not going to go into like those Copenhagen exercises that I was talking about before straight away, which is like basically Nordic hamstring curl equivalent for adductors, so like heavily eccentrically loading. What we're going to try and do is just get some gentle isometric and kind of inner range concentric, and you can think about that like stitches for that skin analogy, where you're keeping things close and you're encouraging a bit of load and movement, but you're not stretching those stitches apart, you're keeping it together. So for adductors, for an example like this, what I'd be looking at is doing some adductor squeeze, so getting a foam roller or a ball or even your fist between knocking the mic, fist between your knees. And doing that in a lying down position and a knees up position, and you can even go to the tabletop position, and having, so basically your adductors in a few different ways, which targets a few ones more specifically, gently squeezing there, and so you're not actually getting any movement, but you're getting this activation and load.
I'm a big fan of the adductor squeeze with the foam roller, because it's got a little bit of give, and it's just a good size to push some resistance against.
And just again on why load is so important as well, and why stretching maybe isn't, is again with this spasming, with this thing, it's generally about that capacity and load piece that I've talked about quite a lot before, which is like thinking about your capacity is how big your bucket is, and then load is how much water you're putting into that bucket. And basically we've got to try and build up our bucket, and stretching isn't going to do that. Our capacity comes from building up strength in that tissue. And so that's got to be our main focus. And when your tissue has a bigger bucket, then it takes longer for it to spasm up and stop you from moving and tearing. So
okay. So just very quickly, guys, to make it as simple as possible, if you have a strain, which we like to call a grade 1 tear or a grade 2 tear, if it's a little bit more serious, the probably the worst thing you can do is stretch it, and the better thing to do,
particularly as the tear is more intense, like more towards that grade 2 side of things, that will make stretching will be particularly bad.
And that's not forever, but that's just in that initial phase or period where it's trying to do its best to stitch that tissue up again and heal. I just lost my computer. Okay, so we've given Becky and her adductor, Becca, and her adductor a little bit of feedback. The other thing I want to do very quickly...
the vascularization is a good idea to just like keep cardio, like something up. So something gentle moving, walking, that you can, walking, or step even ups on a bike or a ski yoga or something like that. Just something to keep moving is a really nice way of
absolutely.
Cool.
So the next one I want to talk about is this question that came through from Sean Christopher, who is also a member of the UMS Online Coaching, he's said, my wife currently has a pinched nerve in her neck, the one that you get when you awake from sleep, which I'm not really sure of the context of that comment, but I'm assuming it's bad enough to wake her up at night. It's more painful than normal, and it's not going away, been going on since Saturday last week. Any ideas on things to make it better? Should she be doing some of those neck exercises where the pain is tolerable? Thoughts? Now, my first comment is I've experienced nerve pain before in my back from a spinal injury, and it can be absolutely crippling and debilitating. Nerve pain it's no joke, you know. And in the neck, the neck is probably, of all of the spine, the higher up the issue, the more you want to treat it with caution. And so Phil, will add here. There's a lot of great. There's a lot of people giving best intentions recommendations and love here, which I love to see. But what I will say personally is any spinal issue, and especially nerve pain, particularly in the neck, don't mess around with it. Go and get it diagnosed properly from a physiotherapist before recommending anything. Now, my go-to is also always gentle spinal mobilization. And, I feel like I would like to say, yes, that's a good idea. But I wouldn't recommend anything until going to see
someone.
physio.
Just go see someone. Yeah. It's just one of the things you really don't want to mess around with. Particularly, with the neck, the higher up it is, the more potential for really bad outcomes if you get it wrong. And it's the internet on a forum like this is probably not the place to get your first line sort of bit of information. Go and see someone, get it diagnosed. You can get lots of information about when you're seeing the person, it really matters sort of where you're feeling it, what you're feeling. Are you getting pins and needle numbness, or are you actually getting weakness? Are you losing the reflexes in your elbow? All of these things that you're just not going to get from a general population kind of cohort on a thing. So really, I do recommend go see someone about that.
Yeah, and if your extent is to reach out to us and connect with Phil online, you can absolutely do that. But he's got
with nerve stuff again. There's certain things with online consultation which are really great. With nerves, it's a bit harder because ideally you'd want to do a neurological exam, and that's a bit more challenging online. So, would recommend if you can go and see someone in person, that would be ideal. Yeah, if not, if you really need more help, get in contact with me and I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort them out.
That's pretty much it, guys. That's all we've got time for today. That's our Physio Friday wrap up.
If you like Physio Fridays, let us know.
Yeah, let us know. Hit comments because we could make it a more regular occurrence. Rad will be back next week on Monday. He will have finished his move. Thank you all. From the bottom of our heart for all the love we've been getting from people. It really means a lot. And welcome to this group is just taking off. It's growing so quickly, and we're so excited about that. Welcome to, I think in the last 7 days, 110 new people have joined the group, which is freaking awesome. And there's some really amazing people joining. We've recently had a bunch of people join our online coaching who are dancers in Las Vegas for Shania Twain, and there's all sorts of really great people joining.
That's so cool.
Get
your questions in. No question is don't feel stupid. Don't feel embarrassed about any questions. Nothing's too simple. If you're thinking it, other people are thinking it. It's really there's so many more new people in the program, and there's so much it is such a fantastic program, but there is a lot to learn. So
absolutely.
Don't be afraid to get things out there. We can just do rapid fire sort of quick answer stuff. Just get your questions in there, and we want to help you out as much as we can.
And quick shout out to everyone listening on the podcast. We're absolutely thumping. Now, we are on the precipice of a big milestone here with YouTube. And for all of you watching this on YouTube, we're about to click over, somewhere in the next couple of weeks, we're going to click over 20,000 subscribers, which is super exciting. We should have had a party at 10,000, but we didn't because we were so caught up in the whirlwind of running the business. We are going to have some special party here on the show for YouTube when we hit 20,000. I might get some custom balloons made or something like that. I don't know. Burgers. Yeah, we'll eat burgers. Richie's suggesting we have a burger celebration. So, guys, smash up the like button if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified when we go live, so you can join us.
And think about just all those people in your life who maybe aren't your internet friends, they're your real life friends, and people who are in the office and they're complaining about pain, or they're complaining about fitness or that kind of thing. send them.
Tell them how awesome we are.
Yeah.
Tell them how awesome we are. And if you just think we're awesome and you feel like paying it forward, give us a Google review or a Facebook review and tell and say how much value you get from just the show or the program or whatever you've done with us.
Because it not only helps us, it helps others because it's
helps
helping
get
us
other people
reach.
over. That's what people look at, to decide whether we're going to be the right person for them to follow or to listen to or to work with. So anyway, guys, sending you all lots and lots of love, and we will see you next week. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.